Ordinances and legislation, March 18th, 5 PM. Clerk, will call the roll.
Counselor Kadim? Counselor Hart?
Here.
Counselor Reposo?
Here.
Counselor Sampson?
Here.
Chair Pereira?
Here. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting throughout any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. Has anyone signed up for citizen input? Item number 2 on the agenda, the minutes of the February 27th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So there's a motion to approve from Counselor Sampson, a second by Counselor Reposa. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3 on the agenda, proposed ordinance, traffic handicap parking, Albion Street West, 30 feet south of Downing Street, Hamilton Street North, 22 feet east of Ridge, King Philip Street South, 447 feet east of King Street, North Underwood Street West, 52 feet north of Langley Street.
Motion for emergency preamble.
Second.
Motion for an emergency preamble. Counselor Reposa made a motion, and I believe Counselor Hart gave it a second. Is there a roll call on emergency?
Counselor Kadim? Counselor Hart?
Yes.
Counselor Reposo?
Yes.
Counselor Sampson?
Yes.
Chair Pereira?
Yes.
Motion to pass through all readings, enrollment, and ordination.
Second.
Motion to pass through all 4 readings and ordination. Counselor Reposo made a motion, and Counselor Hart gave it a second. Roll call. Do you want to do all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item number 4, proposed ordinance, traffic miscellaneum, section 1, regarding loading zones, Locust Street, south 121 feet east of June, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 3 p.m.
You want to go through all of them, or you want to do section by section?
I was going to do section by section, but I can do them all together because it won't make a difference. That's section 1. Section 2 is removing handicap parking, 18th Street east 150 feet south of Merchant, Bay Street east 126 feet north of Folk Rose, Brownell Street north 64 feet of North Court Street, Cash Street west 87 feet south of Pleasant Street, County Street north 53 feet west of Rocliffe Street, Fenner Street west 200 feet north of Dwelly Street, Fulton Street west 87 feet south of Suffolk Street, Grant Street west 178 feet north of William Street, Grant Street west 190 feet north of Division Street, Grinnell Street south 20 feet east of Arlington Street, Hambley Street west 172 feet south of Globe Street, John Street west 202 feet south of Morgan, Middle Street south 144 feet west of Broadway, Norfolk Street south 145 feet east of Fulton Street, North Underwood Street west 136 feet south of Narragansett Street, and Oxford Street west 20 feet north of Pelham Street, Polk Rose Street north 269 feet west of Bowen Street, Polk Rose Street north 440 feet east of Bay Street, and Snell Street north 120 feet west of Dover Street, Stone Street west 35 feet north of Lafayette Street.
Motion to pass.
through first reading.
Second.
Motion to pass through first reading. Counselor Reposa made the motion, Counselor Sampson seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 5 on the agenda is to discuss the establishment of a proposed ordinance to create an affordable housing trust. There are documents, Councilor Pont had come up with this, and this idea, however, he was unable to attend the meeting this evening, but he did forward an ordinance from Lynn that I believe the attorneys have had an opportunity to review it. If I could have the city administrator come down, Attorney Akins, Attorney Fredette, and Mike Dion from Community Development. Are there enough chairs, or do we need another chair? Oh, Seth's bringing you one up. Good evening, gentlemen. I mean, some of you are known, some of you aren't known, so just if you could go around and just state your name for the record.
Michael Dion, Director of Community Development.
Kenneth Fredette, Assistant Corporation Counsel.
Seth Aiken, City Administrator.
Have you had a chance to review the ordinance from Lynn and what Counselor Ponte had submitted regarding affordable housing? Attorney Fredette?
I have had an opportunity to review all the documents in preparation of this meeting.
And your thoughts are?
Respectfully, Counselor, if you're asking what my personal opinion is in regards to the notion of the trust, I don't think it's appropriate for legal to posit that at this time. I found no illegality, which is what I was asked to focus my attention on, was the creation of the trust may occur, may not. I saw nothing in the paperwork here that would make me object to the process by which this council is undertaking, whether we get there or not with the ultimate.
And that's basically what I wanted to know, the legalities of it, what your feelings were on that.
It's certainly, there are a number of communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that have undertaken this. There's also a number that have not, but I saw nothing objectionable in regards to the documents I was asked to review.
Thank you. Mr. Dion, could you give us a little bit of a rundown on affordable housing in the city of Fall River and what you in your office or any other offices have done that you're aware of?
Well, in community development, we are tasked with providing affordable housing and also preservation of affordable housing in the city of Fall River to the benefit of low and moderate income people. We do acquisition, new construction. We have housing opportunities with our first-time home buyer program. We also do preservation of affordable housing, and we do a myriad of homeless prevention and rapid rehousing services through Community Development Agency and through the community CSS. We have 4 CHODOs, which are community housing development organizations, which are nonprofit agencies throughout the city. The 4 of them are called PICAN, People Improving Communities and Neighborhoods, Cherub, Communities Housing Resource Board, the Preservation Society, and also CABA, Community Action for Better Housing. That's basically what we provide in Community Development Agency. I mean, we go out, we purchase houses through our 4 CHODOs, we rehab those houses, and we usually keep them on and rent those properties out to first-time, we'll sell them to first-time home buyers also, but we'll also rent those properties out to as affordable housing.
Councilor Sampson, you have.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and concerns with this, and maybe you can help clarify. So when we talk about affordable housing, with the documentation that was provided to us that I'm looking at and the way that the trust lays out, there's nothing in here that states that it would be affordable housing for Fall River residents. Just the other day, there was, it was all over the news, there was a stabbing on Tripp Street in Fall River. An organization in Boston, they said, we're sending people down because Fall River has more affordable housing than other places. And so an absentee landlord has his house, and this organization was literally just dropping off people for the affordable housing. So, you know, if we create more affordable housing here in the community, and it wasn't that it was so affordable, it was just cheaper than what Boston was having. Nothing in here states that if we create this trust would be for Fall River residents. We could be having this trust that would open up for other places, because we can't, I don't know legally, could you limit it to Fall River residents for, but the way that this lays out in these sections 42, of this does not say that it's for Fall River residents. So are we gonna have more of a problem with affordable housing and people coming in from outside of Fall River when we're really trying to help Fall River residents, as we just seen? This is a problem, and so that's kind of what scares me about this. So I guess that's my first question. Am I correct that I'm not seeing anything in here that governs that this would just be to help Fall River residents?
I didn't see that. Most of our is open to residents of Massachusetts. Our housing authority wait list is for all of the cities in Massachusetts. What I would see, and it's up to this board to discuss this, is do you do this by a lottery process? And also, a lottery process does not stop anybody from applying to that lottery. So yes, you could get people from all over Massachusetts, even outside of Massachusetts.
So in regards to this Fall River Trust, this would, again, just open it up to everybody in Massachusetts. With your 4 chotos that you have, it is already affordable housing that you're working on that's opened up to anybody in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, correct?
Correct.
It's almost like a duplicate of efforts, the way I'm reading this, and I'm not an expert on this, and that's why I lean on your expertise, but do we need another trust? My concern is to open up for more outside residents to come into Fall River and for affordable housing. And what scares me is that we're gonna have more absentee landlords trying to get money out of this trust that we're gonna put in that creates a problem. I mean, that's a terrible thing that happened over on Tripp Street, that an absentee landlord and literally just bust people in from Boston because the rents are cheaper, and they paid the rent up to a year and no one's watching it. So I'm concerned that we're gonna just open it up. Who's gonna monitor it? So if we already have a department that's been doing this for many years, are we duplicating efforts? And I understand the need for housing, but I think when the community is talking about affordable housing, they're looking at helping out the residents in Fall River that had these increased rents, and how can we make that better? But it doesn't look like by this that we can make it better for Fall River residents. We're just gonna add more housing, and it could be for anybody. And so I think maybe we need to look at, is there a way to reduce rent for the already Fall River people? So I just, maybe I'll have more questions as my colleagues ask, but so as I'm correct, this is not just for Fall River residents, this is for anybody.
Correct.
And you are already doing this in the community development out of your office?
Yes.
Okay, with that, I yield.
Thank you. Counselor Reposa.
Sorry, I'll steal this. So I somewhat respectfully disagree with my colleague. Simply the fact that I think we all agree that there's not enough housing, period, around. There's enough people that can't get a place to live. But I guess my thing with this is that it accesses other funding that your office necessarily would not have access to funding to. So donations, like 42-154 talks about private-public partnerships, grants, other revenue streams, and donations. That necessarily wouldn't apply to you because you have a whole different set of funding, correct?
Correct. But if somebody would like to give us donations, I'd be more than happy to take it on.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely. We need a microphone, yeah. So I think my position here, it's a good idea, and I think what Council Sampson's getting at is obviously much down the road, but in the beginning of it, the idea of promoting the development, preservation, and accessibility of affordable housing for low and moderate income individuals is kind of the key attention to this. Like, we're trying to, again, promote more housing that we don't already have, and there's not enough as it is. So to me, my personal opinion is just one more tool in the toolbox to try to get more people off the streets and living in a place to be safe versus not. So I think that's kind of my position on the whole thing. I'll yield.
Mr. Dion, you want to respond to that? I thought you wanted to say something. If not, that's
No, I
fine.
I agree to the point of, there would be more money coming into the Community Development Agency, but that money's there right now, concerning, this really came about from a CPA type of, platform. If you look at most of the, affordable housing trust funds, most of them are either funded through, ARPA funding, They're through inclusionary zoning and through a listing of myriad of things you just said, you know, this council, this committee would have to decide that. You know, you bring up a good point about duplication of services. I mean, community development is already providing the creation and preservation of affordable housing. The Board of Trustees is supposed to operate in three ways. They're supposed to act as a funding entity that solicits project ideas, which is exactly what CDA does. Active initiator of projects or programs, and we do that. And the third thing is kind of a catch-all, is both. We do both of those. You know, one of the things you need to ask yourself is who's going to manage this trust? Well, no, it's not going to be me. But, you know, you look at Boston and their Department of Neighborhood Development does it. Worcester, their Economic Development Agency does it. Lynn, their Planning Department, and Quincy, the CDA does it. You know, so you got to ask yourself at that point, who's going to run that type of thing? The next thing is how you're going to get a dedicated revenue source. You need, you know, it costs about $175,000 per unit to do a housing project in the city. That's not counting the cost of purchasing. And we all know that it's about $500,000, $600,000 to purchase. So if you were to put $2 million away in this fund and you were to do $175,000 per project, you're talking about 11 units. So I want to let everybody know on this board, on this committee, I'm not against it. I'm not, believe me. I just want to let everybody know that this isn't the great white savior of affordable housing problems in the city of Fall River. It's one more thing in the toolbox, but the question is, and I don't mean to put the city administrator on the spot, but how are you going to fund this type of thing? You know, do you bring in inclusionary zoning, which has a negative impact against developers? Developers will not want to come into the city if you do inclusionary zoning. You know, so there's a really a lot to think about. You know, and you know, I know I work every day with it concerning affordable housing. I know that there are people out there who are homeless. I know about the people that have been negative with what's gone on in the past couple weeks. But she is right. I mean, there are people that are being bussed down from Boston, being put into our neighborhoods, and they're not being checked on. They're not having case management, and people come down. And, you know, that's just wrong how they're doing that. You know, we're about 28% right now of affordable housing in the city of Fall River. You know, at what point in time do we say, you know, enough is enough? You know, I think we really need to somewhat down the road to think of a housing policy. I mean, how much market rate housing can the city afford? How much affordable housing can the city have? Those are questions. You know, we're following the 10% rule right now. So every time we do a project, we're doing a project on Pleasant Street. We have 13 units. We're putting in around 6 units of affordable housing to that development. We did the 64 Durfee Street. We put 22% of low-income housing in that project. And in other projects, we've put in 10%. We try to follow the 10% rule all the time. That's what we've done so far.
Thank you, Mr. Dion. Councilor Hart?
I think you might have just answered my question. I was going to ask you about when you said about buying and renting. I guess maybe compared to how much do you rent compared to how much do people actually buy?
Well, out of the 30, I think the city has about 34,000 units. Out of the 34,000 units, 25,000, a little less than that, is rental units. So right now, I can tell you, and I'm ashamed of this, right now, our first-time home buyer program is 0. We have not had any because of the price of the housing.
Right, exactly.
Right now, a person earning 80% of the area median income cannot afford to buy a single-family home. We had that before. Probably if you go back maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we had people that were 50%, 60% of the area median income, where we could sell them a house. They were right on the cusp, but 80% people could afford them. Not any longer.
So those people that are renting, is that affordable?
There are some people that,
I know you go by the 10% rule, so,
there are still affordable units in the city. There's a lot of them.
right.
A lot of our homeless just recently are people who are on fixed incomes, and their rents have gone up. I mean, I haven't seen the rents gone up like this ever, where they've gone from, you know, a person was affording $800 a month, and that rent went up to $1,500 a month.
Some 1,800.
Yeah, so, and if a person has a fixed income of $1,000 a month, they can't afford that increase. So that's where you're seeing a little bit of the homelessness problem going forward, you know, that we're dealing with. But there are still, I mean, we did a study of the 500 units that we have. There's a considerable amount, and I want to say most of them are still around $700, $800, $900.
Right, so that's
But
my
people
point.
are
I mean,
moving.
So you're actually doing what,
Again, I'm not against this,
Right.
but I don't want to seem as Mr. Negative, or I'm saving my own, you know, I'm saving community development, but it is basically what we do,
right,
you
that's
know?
it, I yield. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, Counselor Sampson?
So I just want to clarify something that you said, because I think that when we talk about affordable housing, it rattles people's cage, and it's a trigger word for people. And so I know that we have an issue, but again, you said something that I think people need to know, because it's been said a couple of times that this is a different source, we can get donations. You, on the record, you could get donations. If someone wanted to donate $2 million to your department, you would be more than happy to take it.
I do get donations now.
You get to,
I do get donations now. They're not anywhere close to $2 million, but
but you're open to it.
hey, I'll take any,
Anyone
I'll
that's
take
listening.
anything.
So you 500 units you have.
Yeah, I want to say there's about 500 units in the city that have what we call an affordable housing restriction, and that's what we do. We give low-interest loans, 1% loans, and in turn, what people do is give us a restriction on their property. They can only rent to a certain income level, and they can only charge a certain income level.
So that's important to know, because we have a department in the city that's doing this, 500 units, and we're talking about establishing a trust that could maybe do 11 units, maybe 22 if we say the figures are too high. But I think for me, the fracturedness of different programs, the fracturedness of different committees, sometimes too many hands in the pot. And so if one would want to bolster or help or have ideas for the Community Development Office, I think for me, that sits a little bit better, or have a longer conversation about where this is going. I think to rush in and establish a trust and not really sit down and look, this is the first time I'm hearing that you had 500 units, and we're looking at establishing something new, when everything that's being done actually can be done under you. And I think we're at such a critical point in the city of Fall River with things that are going on, that we really need to take a look at what we have, what we're doing. Can we do it better with having a new committee that comes up with new ideas, that we could put a pot of money here, and maybe we can't, because actually, we're looking about establishing a committee that we don't have any money. But if we have could we bolster what we're doing, and we're doing well? So those are my points. With that, I yield.
Anybody else? The question that I have is, does Mr. Fiola's office do something as well with,
He does market rate housing. He provides a service. He's kind of a consultant. He provides a service to developers throughout the city for a certain amount of money, and he develops market rate housing. Some of that market rate housing is also, we match it sometimes doing some affordable with it.
some affordable with that? I think Councilor Sampson asked a question about, would these units be, and is there a way legally to say Fall River residents get a preference, or just like sometimes we have situations where they may give veterans preference? Is that something legal to do, Attorney Fredette, to your knowledge, or is that something that we probably
So
wouldn't be able to
respectfully,
do?
that was not an issue that was researched in preparation of this meeting.
Okay.
It would be a complete guess on my part, which would be inappropriate.
Okay.
To get.
Well, that's a good thing to.
I'm just wondering, Councilor Sampson?
Could you maybe explain a little bit for people that are listening, and maybe, and for myself as well, the difference between market rate housing, low-income housing, and affordable housing, because I think it gets mixed up where, you know, what's market rate, what's low income, what's affordable. We have 28% of, well, affordable housing. So could you just give and if you're not prepared, I'm sorry, but, you know, is there?
All I can tell you is what the Community Development Agency does. We provide housing to 80% of the area median income. That's the key, okay? It can go as low as 0 to 30% of area median income. So if you look at the sliding chart of what it is, you'll see like a family of, say, one, okay? That 0 to 30 might be $17,000, and that 80% might be $50,000. So it all depends. It's all on a sliding scale. Market rate is actually what market rate is, what a person will pay for it. I mean, all housing is market rate housing, from what I can tell. I mean, some people will pay $800, some people will pay $2,000. You know, I've heard a lot of different scenarios out there of workforce housing and affordable housing. I would say in this community, affordable housing is 60 to 80 to 30%, around there. 50 to 80% of area median income.
Well, I believe Councilor Sampson talked about an issue that had happened with affordable housing, people from Boston buying a house, and I believe that their rent was something like $2,400 a month.
Yeah,
That doesn't sound too affordable to,
that's cheaper than
Yeah,
Boston.
you're looking probably at a boarding house type of rooming house type of issue where, you know, it's cheaper down here. I mean, Fall River, even though it's gone up and it's quite considerable, we are one of the cheapest, I think, areas of Massachusetts.
And I think with a situation like that, you have these organizations out of Boston paying for these units and then, and putting people in them, but they're paying for them down here in Fall River because it's cheaper than Quincy or Brockton. So, and also, I think, is it fair to say that rent, there's a number of factors that rent went up, but the price of houses, a 3-tenement, you know, when people owned it, they didn't have a mortgage on it, they could charge cheaper rent, and then in the past 4 or 5 years, they sold their 3-tenement for $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, and you gotta charge, you know, $1,500 to cover the rent, and so people think it's astronomical, but just to cover the basics of owning that house, it's gone through the roof.
Yeah, I think you've hit it right on the button. Some of those houses have sold for $600,000. You know, a new landlord or an outside investor comes in, it's a business. They're looking to get as much out of that property as they can. So they raise the rents, and a person who was paying $800, $900 is now looking at a $1,500 to $1,800 bill.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just to cover your mortgage and your fees a lot of the time. And so, you know, for me, I think it's looking at that avenue of how do we support our local landlords that are not, you know, absentee landlords or landlords that live out of the city. I'll yield to my colleagues.
I think some of the problems that I'm hearing from some landlords that I know that do have empty units, they're feeling that, you know, we rent the units and then we have to pay to evict people and all of that because, you know, Cory checks, credit checks aren't being done. And I think that would be something that would help some of the landlords that have rents that are 8, 9, or even, you know, 900, 950, would help them where they would rent them. But I know a couple that will not rent. They would rather have the apartments empty. I know one on Irving Street. I know one down the north end. And, you know, they say after you have to chase for your rent, and there's problems because they don't, you know, do that. And I suggested that they contact realtors who pay, I think you pay a month's rent or something to a realtor who will do that background work for you, because that would open up some apartments as well. But they don't want to take the chance on people that aren't from around here. I mean, years ago, even in the housing authority, you would call a landlord and say, is this tenant a good tenant? And the landlord would be honest with you. Now a landlord wants to get rid of that person, so they say, yeah, they're a great tenant, and they're not. But it's landlords that are calling like from out of town. They don't care. Before, it was just the landlords in Fall River. So if the housing authority knew you lied to them about a tenant, they weren't going to take your word on the next one. So that was a problem. But I agree with Council Sampson. If the money's going up, prices are selling, homes are selling for a lot more money, people have to pay their mortgage. That's why we could never do a rent control for that very issue. Attorney Aiken, do you have anything to add in on this, or where we would get the money for to do a program like this, if it would be beneficial from the administration's point of view?
From the administration's point of view, the conversations have really been, where would the money come from? So ARPA is really not an option at this point. I mean, there's little drips and drabs. I know in the county, there might be $160,000 or so left. In terms of, money from local receipts and budget funds, I mean, we're grappling with some honest-to-goodness issues coming up in the next couple of years, trying to figure out how we pay for those things that we have to pay for that are important. I mean, Diamond is an essential, it's an essential project that's going to serve the community and our kids in a way that we just need to step up and do it. So, this obviously is important. It's certainly well-meant. We just don't know how we would pay for it. Really, the only option that I think is out there is coming up with new fees and taxes and other things, and no one wants to do that, because then it becomes a hardship for developers who are trying to to do things sometimes even on a shoestring as it is. So there is no easy solution to this, and that's really the conclusion that we've come to as we've continued to talk about it.
Okay, I mean, I do understand what you're saying, and I think with all, market rate housing and all this housing and people coming in, we just built a high school that is at maximum capacity. We're looking for, pre-K classes for kids. So when people are moving in, you've got to look at all the other services that need to be expanded as well. Your police, your fire, your school departments, and everything. So, I mean, I was just concerned, people moving in and looking at affordable as, $2,400 rent didn't sound very affordable to me. But is there a motion on the floor? Or Council Reposa?
Make a motion to pass through first reading.
What we just discussed? Okay.
Is there a second on that? There is no second. Another motion?
I make a motion, leave to withdraw. I don't think that we have enough information here. I just don't think that we have that information here. I just think it's so premature.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
There is a motion on the floor for leave to withdraw. There was a motion made by Council Sampson and a second.
Can I comment?
Well, not really, because there's a motion and a second on the floor. We're going to take a vote, but, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, if the case is we don't have enough information, can we table it instead? Do more research on it, or?
Well,
I'll-
she already did a motion, but if you want to make a motion to table and you get a second, motion to table takes
Motion to
precedence
table.
over.
Yeah.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call?
There was a motion to table, and Councilor Sampson gave it a second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Kadim? Counselor Hart?
Yes.
Counselor Reposo?
Yes.
Counselor Sampson?
Yes.
Chair Pereira?
No. The next item on the agenda, thank you so much. Corporation Counsel, you're here with me?
I'm here with you.
Okay. The next resolution is to convene with Corporation Counsel, representatives of the local taxi companies and interested parties to discuss ways to expand accessibility of transportation by amending the current taxi license ordinance. And item number 7 is a discussion with taxi cab rates and possible cap the number of medallions. I believe they kind of intertwine. Would it be the pleasure of the council to take both items 6 and 7 together?
Yeah.
Motion to lift item 7 from the table. Combine and lift.
Right. He has to
Motion
lift first.
Motion to combine 6 and 7. We'll take
Okay, but you have a motion to lift would take precedence, so
Okay.
there's a
Motion
motion
to
to lift.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
So motion to lift item 7, and then
Motion to take 6 and 7 together.
motion to take
Second.
6 and 7 together. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There are some members here from the taxi cab, I believe Mr. Hume, Fred Hume is here, and Faith, who are from Town Taxi. If you'd like to come up. Corporation Counsel, would you like to go first on what you've researched in this?
Certainly will. Thank you. To the council and taxi cab companies. What I did was engage in research which followed up on Corporation Counsel Rumsey's research from a couple of years ago, which is when I understand this issue or similar issues regarding taxi cab companies were posed to the board. And again, this is not personal opinion. This is a research of not just in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but nationally on the issue of medallions and otherwise. The first resolution is 6, which is really about transportation for Americans with disabilities. And let me just say, life-wise experience, my only brother was a quadriplegic for 47 years until he passed away. So I do have some experience in regards to transportation issues confronting those who can't drive themselves and are completely dependent, even partially dependent. When I read this ordinance, my curiosity would be, how do you possibly impose on these transportation companies the potential liability issues of drivers getting persons with disabilities in and out? Are we, it's not in here, but are we requiring the companies to purchase vehicles that can make those disabled accessible? And who is going to transfer in and out? Because if we're talking about taxi cabs that are not normally fitted for the transportation of disabled people, then you have to get them fitted. And unless these folks constantly have persons to assist them, we're putting it on the taxi cab drivers themselves. So I'm very, very concerned about the liability issues that 6 brings about it. I think it's a, who can argue with the idea that we need to get cabs better able to bring disabled people around town? I also think that there are a number of services in place. My brother didn't live in Massachusetts, so I can't talk about what's available here in Fall River, and I'm simply not cognizant enough of what is available, but there are, to my understanding, services available to the disabled. So, in regards to 6, my concern as a lawyer would be, how could you possibly impose that liability on the taxi cab companies, and are they even amenable? Are we forcing them, or are they agreeing to expand a fleet necessary to comply with what's being asked?
Perhaps I should give you a little bit of history. None of my colleagues were here in 2006, but I was. I'm older. But many years ago, back in 2005-06, I received a call from Mr. Robillard, who is in a wheelchair. And Mr. Robillard, very vocal with city government and attends many council meetings, very involved in the community. And he told me that he felt that people with disabilities had no voice in the city, and he was right. So at that time, with his assistance and Mayor Lambert was mayor at the time, we put together a commission for disability. And that commission was then formed in 2006. Jim Smith was the city administrator at the time. And there was a meeting, and it was decided that they would put out an RFP to assist a taxi cab company in purchasing a handicap accessible vehicle. The RFP did go out, and at that time, I believe Mr. Humes from Town Taxi was the only one who had put in for it. The city said that they would give up to $10,000 for the purchase of said vehicle. They would have to buy the vehicle first, show the receipt to the city, and the city would give a $10,000 contribution to that vehicle. So Mr. Hume went out, bought a vehicle. I think at the time he paid maybe $18,000 for the vehicle. But then you had Mayor Lambert leaving, the president of the council at the time, Bill Whitty, was acting mayor for a little bit, and then we had a new mayor in Representative or Mayor Bob Correa. Somewhere in that kerfuffle, Mr. Hume never got the $10,000. So the city basically reneged on the deal. Mr. Hume is here, and in conversations that I've had with him, there wasn't enough response from people to use it. The insurance on a vehicle was very expensive. So he ended up not being able to keep that vehicle on the road, and it ended up going to auction and was like $3,000 that he got for it. So, you know, it was bad. Now, today, I find that there are many people in the city, not only in wheelchairs, but people who are in those motorized scooters, and they may want to go to the mall, or they may want to go to, you know, up to South Coast, Market Basket, what have you. But they're going to use that scooter once they get there. So there needs to be a mechanism to transport that. And the other thing was, we'll talk about after, was the medallions, that the city then said anybody can get a medallion, so they have nothing with a medallion. I believe they have 12 cars on the road, but because of violence in the city, a number of taxi cab drivers have been stabbed, I think 3. I know of one woman in her late 50s, early 60s, had been raped, so she didn't want to drive anymore. So now they're closing at 11 o'clock. And they're also faced with the Uber and Lyft people coming in. So people will call the cab company, download, you know, text for an Uber, text for a Lyft, and then whoever gets there first kind of gets that ride. So there's a lot of, you know, a lot of disparities on what taxi cabs used to be and what they are now. So that's kind of the crux of where it came to be. And I know that if somebody had a wheelchair that, you know, you broke your foot or something and you had a wheelchair to get, but you could get up and, you know, transport yourself into the backseat of a car, then the cab driver could fold that wheelchair and put it in the trunk. But many of their drivers are older people who can't do that. And you bring up a really good question about what is the liability. And I think there was something, too, where the taxi cab companies wanted to charge an extra $25 if it was, you know, which isn't fair, and it's not legal. It's very discriminatory against an individual with a handicap. So I'm sharing that so that my colleagues all know as well. I thought Mr. Robillard would be here. Well, you came in behind me. Why don't you come down, Danny? If you, I'm sure he'll have some information to share. And we're trying to look at what can we do in the city to make sure that people with a disability have the same freedoms as other people. And when the city has activities in the summertime at night, you know, we don't want somebody to have to, like Danny, I have yelled at him a few times when I've seen him in the middle of the road, because I know that it's not safe. But he wants to be able to attend different activities, as do many other people in the city, and they can't because of their scooter or their wheelchair. And certainly Danny's wheelchair is like my great-nephew's, where you can't really lift that up and put it in the trunk of a car. So that's kind of what we're looking at as a committee here. This is all the history that happened before it happened. It's over here. What can we do now moving forward to make sure that everybody in the city has the same ability to get from one place to another? So if that helps, does anybody have any questions? Do you want to hear from Danny
Yeah,
first? You got it on, Danny?
Members of the Ordinance Committee, Chair Pereira, you've pretty much given a good summary of the past history. I do know that in the past several years, Mr. Hume's company had on at least several occasions that I'm aware of, had an accessible vehicle. I know that he transported one individual from Borden East, not him directly, but his company, one individual from Borden East up to the airport. Another went to a karaoke event. He was running it, in my opinion, and he's here, and I'm happy to listen to him. Let me say, I have nothing personal against Mr. Hume. I feel bad that the city reneged on the deal, but it was nothing that the Disability Commission could have changed. We had no funding of our own to put forth that money. We went forth on the proposal based on the advice of the city administrator. But first of all, if you were ever going to have a van, you'd have to open it up whereby non-disabled people and disabled people could ride in the same vehicle. Because if you're waiting to just have individuals with disabilities call in, you're never going to have enough to make it worthwhile. It's just not going to happen. So I hope we can find some way to make it work, because right now, and it's nobody's fault, but the bottom line is the only group of people that can't access a taxi in the city of Fall River are people that are confined to wheelchairs. It's not right, it's wrong, and this committee, in my opinion, as the issuing authority of the taxi licenses, has to resolve the issue in some fashion. So I'm happy to listen to all parties. I'm happy to help in any way I can, and I'll answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Also, on the phone, who called in, we called him earlier, is Dennis Pacelli. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Madam Chair.
Dennis is the chairman of the Commission on Disability. And also joining us is Eric Russo, who is from CERTA. So hopefully, Councilor Sampson.
So I have some thoughts. I'm glad that we took 6 and 7 together, because I think that they're directly related to the problem that we have here. So if I say anything out of line, just slap me, tell me, and correct me, okay? But I think the taxi cab companies have been handcuffed by the antiquated medallion system. That's the problem number one. So, you guys have to get these medallions. You can only have so many numbers of cars. And, but Uber and Lyft come in, and they're flooding the streets. I mean, you showed me earlier, Lyft's got so many cars out here, Uber's got so many cars, and you guys, they're not paying the same fees or anything like that. So I think that's a problem. I think that's a number one problem. The other problem that we have is that Mr. Robillard is absolutely right. A handicapped person cannot get a cab. Now, you would say, oh, well, there are other services. CERTA. What time does CERTA run till, the buses?
Only about till 9:30.
So 9:30 at night. So
But we start at 6.
6 in the morning. So 9:30 at night, you run till, and then there's another group, Pari, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, but you have to call in advance and schedule. If a person in a wheelchair, and we have very young people in wheelchairs, youth, all the way up to elderly, if they wanted to go out for an evening, they wanted to go on a date, they'd have a curfew. They had to be in by 9:30 because your buses are done. So they couldn't take their date out because they got to get back on that bus, right? Not much of a date, right? Where are you going with that? So, I mean, it is correct that there is definitely a problem that a person in a wheelchair should be able to go out to a bar, go out to a restaurant, go out to the movies, just like anybody else. And it's not fair. But on the other side of that, is it fair to say that these cab companies have to go ahead, purchase a vehicle, hire someone, train that technician to be certified, and here lies the problem. So I think the issue that we need to discuss, because it is the will, and it's a good will, it is the will of the Disability Commission, because I talked to Mr. Robillard and Mr. Pacelli today, and it is the will of them to use the ordinance that was established in, it was an old ordinance from 99, reconfigured in 2014, 2015, that the taxi cab companies operate and have a handicap vehicle. And I agree, if this was to happen, they should be able to use that vehicle to pick anybody up. But do we make that, this already, these companies that already are handcuffed on what they can do, make them pay for a vehicle? And so I think that it is our job to look at in the ordinance committee, what can we do and how do we solve that problem? How do we get a vehicle to you guys? Are there benefits? Can there taxes? What can we do if a cab company gets a van? How do we get you a van? Do we put it on you, the onus on you, you have to do it? So I think there is a problem in both areas. I don't know how to solve it, but I definitely see it is not fair that a person in a wheelchair cannot go out just like I could. It's terrible. And it's not fair that the cab company has to purchase this when Uber and Lyft don't do anything. I was talking to Mr. Robillard today. I'm like, oh, let me see if I cannot get a wheelchair. No, I can order an Uber with a pet, but I can't order an Uber with a wheelchair. It's terrible. So, I mean, how is there a way that we could actually bolster the cab companies in the city of Fall River and carve out this niche market that's not being met to help you guys, and how does that look? But I'm going to yield, because I want to ask you, you've had experiences with transporting people, and so I'm going to let you speak.
I did a job on Thanksgiving. I came in. Yeah, we had a handicap van.
Okay, Dennis, I'll be right with you.
And
Go ahead, Fred, and then Mr. Pacelli would like to say something.
I went with the driver because the driver was trained how to strap him in. So I said, okay. I says, I'll put the strap over the guy's lap. And I said, if that gets too tight, let me know. He started screaming. I said, what's the matter? He says, it's too tight, you're hurting me, I said, I just laid it across your lap. That kind of poisoned me a little bit. He didn't have an electric wheelchair, okay? Electric wheelchair, you gotta get something heavy duty. Is that there? You run the big white vans, right?
That's correct. Yes, for many.
You're not gonna do it with a Toyota.
So there are a lot of options out there in terms of vehicles, but I know that Mr. Pacelli was going to speak next, so I don't
Yeah.
want to interrupt.
Hold on a second, Mr. Russo. Mr. Pacelli, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, first of all, let's, my allergies are very bad today, but I'm gonna do my best. Let's start with the premise that the Americans with Disabilities Act is no younger than 33 years old. It was passed in 1990, so we had much, much more time in this 33 years to come up with ways that taxi cab companies, which are required under Title III of the ADA to provide taxi services. They're not required to go out and buy the vehicles, but if they have them, they're required not to discriminate. Wheelchairs, some wheelchairs can be stowed, just the way taxi cab companies routinely stow luggage each and every day. So there's no question here. I don't know what the Corporation Council's background is on the Americans with Disabilities Act. I've had a lot of practice as an ADA coordinator on a college campus, and I chaired a local disability commission before coming back to Fall River. But it's not a question. It's not a question of whether you can or you can't. You can. And other municipalities do have accessibility standards in their city ordinances. The city of Boston, Massachusetts, I believe you have some of the material in your packets, and the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, all have requirements and regulations in their taxi cab service providers that require compliance with the ADA. So it's not a question of whether you can, you can't. It's a question of you have to. You can't discriminate against people with disabilities in providing their services. And moreover, you can't discriminate against a class of individuals with disabilities, namely wheelchair users, in providing such services. So we can take that off the table. Working with taxi companies, of course we're willing to do that. Sensitivity training, there are options out there. We worked with Fall River Taxi after the 2016 June 7th meeting when this issue was tabled. We worked with Fall River Taxi and we worked with SRTA. And we had a structure. I don't know what happened to it, where SRTA would provide the training. So there are partnerships. Cape Cod has a partnership where training is provided so that their taxi companies can provide and comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there are resources out there. There are ways to do this. The commission is willing to do it. I think that the taxi company, Town Taxi, already has accessible vehicles. They do provide services, in my understanding, to People Incorporated and some other places. So the vehicles are there. So I guess the issue is, how do we make this work? This 33-year-old requirement under the ADA, how do we make this work together? How do we perform or provide and have collaborative partnerships so that Town Taxi can comply with the ADA like other municipalities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? There are plenty of resources out there. I was told by the Boston Commission on Disability that the MBTA has some funds that can help local taxi companies do this. So there are resources out there. How can we make this work? How can we make
And that's
this
our
work
goal,
so that...
and that's our goal, Mr. Pacelli, to see what we can do. This resolution had been filed, I mean, I filed one back in 2006, thought we had gotten it resolved. Then there was another one in 2022, and I'm bringing that up, and we're in 2024.
But I don't want to hear...
So we need to,
I
you're
don't want to
right,
hear
we need to
about
figure it out.
why this can't be done. I want to hear about how Town Taxi can comply with Title III of the ADA and have accessible taxi services for wheelchair users. That's the issue, as far as I'm concerned.
You're absolutely right. And just for you to know, we also invited Fall River Taxi to be here, because there's two taxi companies in the city. And also, we have with us Mr. Russo from CERTA. Mr. Russo, would you be able to add, what were you willing to provide before? What does CERTA provide to the community with regards to people with disabilities?
Sure.
Can you speak
So
into the microphone? I'm sorry.
when we,
Get a little closer.
Mr. Pacelli and Mr. Robillard approached me almost 10 years ago to talk about this and see if we had any capacity to be able to assist. And so working with, I think it was Fall River Taxi, Mr. Robillard would remember better than me.
Madam Chair, may I for a second?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. We were nanograms away from an agreement with Fall River Taxi, and then the business was sold from Isabel Isherwood. He was the original owner.
Okay.
And the gentleman we worked with was Anthony Rousseau. He was one of 3 owners at the time that originally bought the company from Mr. Isherwood. We were nanograms away from an agreement outside the capacity of this committee. Mr. Rousseau bought a vehicle using his own funds. I sat in it. We were just about, he was about ready, he applied for a medallion, told us the medallion was gonna be used to run the service, and then he fell off the planet.
Thank you for that. But that's kind of what's happened along the way. It's like we get this close and then it falls apart. But
So we were gonna
what
offer-
services?
Working with them, we were going to provide any training they needed in terms of utilizing mobility enhanced vehicles, whether it be loading and tying down passengers, whether it be sensitivity training in the area. We were also willing to either provide or help identify areas where accessible adaptive equipment on vehicles could be serviced. A lift, such as Mr. Hume was referring to, is a hydraulic lift, and it's not unusual, but it is a different piece of equipment that most Ford dealerships wouldn't be able to necessarily work on. So that was the basis of where we were able to fill in some of the missing gaps. And I think that one of the issues was that they were doing a good job of recognizing the complete picture of the business opportunity that may be available. In Massachusetts, we have human service transportation, which is brokered by two regional transit authorities, Massachusetts Regional Transit Authority and the Greater Attleboro Taunton Regional Transit Authority. And what they were hoping to do was to have enough vehicles where they could contract with one of those two entities to provide the HST work in this region. And if they had enough accessible vehicles, then they would be able to do that and have some more fixed income streams for their business. Like Mr. Robillard mentioned, Mr. Rousseau, the Italian version, he fell off the face of the earth as far as we could tell. But we had drawn up a contract and we were ready to sign.
Okay.
Can I ask you?
Mr. Humes, you had something that you wanted to add when Mr. Robillard was speaking.
I want to ask, you're handicapped, you have to make an appointment to get it?
For our service, yes. Yep. Our service is the day before, you must book your ride, at least by the day before.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
Can I live with that? Now, do you train for school bus also?
We do not.
Okay, because out there, to drive a cab with a pupil plate on it, how much, what's the training now? 500 a person? 250 a person for the first training? Every year, okay, for school bus. That's another thing that's nothing to do with this, but, just wanted to let you know that every time we turn around, it's, we're jumping through hoops. I took the gentleman, didn't I put you in the van when I bought it? I took it right down to City Hall cab from this, to downtown City Hall. I put you up and I asked you how you liked it, you said it was fine.
You are absolutely correct, Mr. Human. Every time I give background and history, I give the complete story. I say, and I spoke to two counselors on this committee today, and I said to each one of them that you bought the van with anticipation of being repaid. 2 members of the commission, including myself, sat in that van, and it was perfectly fine. That's correct.
Now, how many times did you call? Not to put you in a pickle or anything, but how many calls did I get from it? I waited 3 months.
I have no idea how many calls you got because I never knew the van was in service. I had people
I
tell me.
had to have it in service to take it down here, sir.
I had people tell me that you had other vans in service over the years with a wheelchair lift. And I know of several people that you transported to different places. They had to make reservations. Now, with all due respect.
Yes, sir.
With all due respect, sir, if you have to make a reservation, that's not a taxi. That's a demand response service. That's what paratransit is. It's not taxi service.
thank you. Mr. Russo, CERTA will go up until 9:30,
Yes,
but it's with calling and scheduling.
the day before,
The-
at least by the day before.
You have to call and schedule the day before. What other services like that are available? I think you mentioned a couple of other places.
In the city, I'm not aware of services that mirror ours, but,
Seekonk.
so Seekonk is served by GATRA, and so it's a different transit authority, but they provide similar service to us. What GATRA also does is they provide the human service transportation for anybody that has a PT1 in our region.
Okay.
So that is a slightly different service.
Attorney Fredette, is there anywhere in the state law that says taxi cabs must provide or no?
No, it was brought up that possibly the Americans with Disability Act does. I have not seen that. I know Mr. Hume, when he heard the comments.
Right.
Mentioned, they only have one van. So I don't know that there's a wealth of resources that respectfully was suggested to exist. But currently, I have not found any legal obligation imposed by the state of Massachusetts by law that requires taxi cab companies in their obtaining of medallions to devote a certain percentage or any whatsoever towards the maintaining of handicap accessible vans. And Mr. Hume, who runs a service, would probably be able to comment off of that, whether they're aware. They deal with the laws far more often than I do, but I didn't find anything in my research.
You haven't found that?
If there was enough business here, I would do it. I just started this here in 1969. I'm still learning. But if you can tell me how to catch another fly, I'm with you.
Can, Counselor Sampson?
Well, I think that there's some, headway right there. And I think that part of the problem that you may have entered into the past was because you didn't use that vehicle unless a person with a disability called.
A lot of people won't get in the one we got now.
Correct.
I'll
So,
take it anytime you wanna come pick me up, I'll take it.
so,
Little crew, I can't get you, there's no lift in it.
Then it's not an accessible vehicle.
so,
Under the
It's a
terms that I'm
handicap van.
talking about now, I yield. I apologize, Councilor Sampson.
it's okay. So I'm thinking that we definitely need to, we need to think about this because it's a service that needs to happen. It's not fair, but Mr. Pacelli, you mentioned that there were some funds possibly that these cab companies could get to purchase a vehicle or some funds. Did you mention that?
Yeah, it was brought to my attention by the Boston Commission on Disability that there may be some funds out there, and I'm willing to pursue that further.
So
Can I mention something?
yeah.
Rhode Island Taxi, Economy Cab and Yellow Cab in Providence, Rhode Island. I deal with all these people, down at Cape Pete and all these people. And what they did was, I believe they paid $2,000 a car for a brand new van. They got a brand new handicap van, and they had to keep it on the road. I believe it was 3 years or 100,000 miles. Then they get the title. That's what they did.
So there may be something like that available.
Government,
Government,
in the
okay.
government.
So I'm glad to hear that you're not opposed to this. There are ways that we can look at this. I think that there's just some information. I think we need to keep the discussion going. I absolutely do. I don't know, I'll yield to my colleagues if they want to say anything, but I definitely think that this is something that needs to happen, but we need to be very precise and concise about it so it doesn't affect, or we don't want to bankrupt the cat.
All about the cost.
So I think that, but we're hearing things that may be able to help, and also it may be able to bolster, because the Lyft and Uber is not doing it. So if we could bolster local business, that's a win-win all the way around. So I don't know if my colleagues want to add anything, but I'd make a motion to table until we get some more
Do
information.
you yield, or do
I
you wanna?
yield. No, I
Because
yield.
I
You
think,
know what?
I think Counselor Reposo wanted to say, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Pacelli, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to bring to everybody's attention that the MBTA paratransit program called The Ride, they do make use of Uber and Lyft as part of their vendors to provide paratransit services. The MBTA in their MBTA district. The program, because I was a ride user for many years before I came back to Fall River. So they weren't using Uber and Lyft at the time, but as of I came back in 2009, so around 2010, 2011, they began using Uber and Lyft as part of their paratransit vendor.
But I don't think that their Ubers and Lyfts have accessibility for a wheelchair like Mr. Robilard's.
Well, they would, in order to be a ride provider for the MBTA, they would have to. Now, I can look into how they're pulling it off, but in order to be a vendor to provide paratransit services in the MBTA districts that use the ride, they would have to have it.
Okay. I think Councilor Washington wanted to file a motion. This is my thing as chairman of this committee. I chaired this committee years ago. I'm back to chairing it now. I've kind of chaired all these committees. But I don't want us to say we're going to table this like this was tabled on the medallions, and now, 2 years later, we're talking about it. If we're going to do this, I would make a suggestion that if the committee wishes to table, that Attorney Fredette and Mr. Russo and owners of a cab company meet with the Commission on Disability. Mr. Pacelli is extremely knowledgeable of the ADA law. He is a wealth of information and will be very helpful in discussions, along with Mr. Robillard, to have a meeting and look at what are the different options, what's going to work for everyone. And if it is a problem with the purchase of a vehicle, I think that the administration needs to do something, because quite frankly, Mr. Humes was promised something and it never came through. But if there's money out there to be able to purchase, or if we can use Bristol County ARPA and make a motion from this committee to get X amount of dollars from that to do it. I know we just purchased the trolley for the city, and that is handicap accessible and does have a lift. And we made sure that we did that because we knew that that was important. But if there is a motion to table, I'd like to know that there can be a meeting of the minds to look at what legally we can do and what we can't do, just for this portion of, I don't want to table everything, but just for this portion of this,
Number 6.
if there is a motion.
I make a motion to table number 6.
Madam Chair, before it's tabled, may I add 2 quick things?
If I say no, you're still going to add it, Danny.
No,
I've
I
been here forever
can
with you.
withdraw my motion.
Absolutely, Danny, absolutely, Mr. Robillard.
May I ask Mr. Hume a question?
Sure.
Are you doing any contract work that requires you to have an accessible vehicle of any kind?
No.
No,
Have you ever in the last 10 years?
no.
Okay, and for full disclosure, Madam Chair, I want to say, like Mr. Pacelli, I am a member of the Fall River Disability Commission. I'm also the ADA rep for the Southeastern Regional Transit Authority Advisory Board.
I'd like to say something. I appreciate you people trying to get it together. I hope we can get it together. I'm not against you. For years, we've been trying to get this worked out.
I understand.
I just got burnt once, and, you know, now you get a little bit shaky.
I understand, Mr. Hume, but it was, and I believe you understand this as well.
Yes,
The way you got burnt was through no fault of the commission. You had an issue with the city and a transition within administrations. The Disability Commission had absolutely no funding and no ability to fund that grant that you were promised by the Lambert administration and Jim Smith at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Washington, you were going to make a motion?
She made it.
Was there a
6.
second?
Number 6, I second it.
You second,
Yeah.
okay. Motion to table by Councilor Sampson and second by Councilor Hart. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Roll call.
Counselor Kadim? Counselor Hart?
Yes.
Counselor Reposo?
No.
Counselor Sampson?
Yes.
Chair Pereira?
Yes. The second part that we're going to talk about is the medallion, and Councilor Reposa and Councilor Kilby, no, I'm sorry, they were absent when this came through. But it was to limit the number of taxi cab medallions available to 50, increase yearly fees, $60 per medallion to $100 per medallion, allow the transfer of medallions between vehicles without incurring additional fee, allow the number of medallions to be owned by the business, such as liquor licenses, so that they would have their value to the business, and waive the $25 fee for resealing taxi meters, a one-time $1 increase in the drop due to the severe increase in fuel. That was sent to Attorney Rumsey. And Attorney Rumsey wrote back that attached, please find the 2015 article from the Heritage Foundation regarding the pros and cons of taxi cab medallion system. In short, the article concludes that taxi cab medallion systems artificially erect economic barriers to entry that protects existing taxi interests from competition. Succinctly stated in the last sentence of the article, medallion systems are dying, and policymakers should let them die. There are other articles that reach the same conclusion. For example, in 2011, a report that was prepared for the City Council of the District of Columbia, who was considering the creation of the medallion system, stated the following regarding implementation of the medallion system. By restricting supply and creating high barriers to entry, there is an unmet demand for taxi service, longer wait times for taxis, more response to phone requests, less clean vehicles, and poorer quality of service at higher fares. So that was the response that we received. No, he doesn't have to. Yeah. Dennis, do you want to stay on the line as we talk about medallions, or?
I don't think I need to.
Okay, but if you want to, that's fine.
I think I'm gonna.
Okay, thank
Have
you.
a good day, Mr. Baselli.
Thank you, Mr. Pacelli, for your
Thanks,
input.
Dennis.
Mr. Fredat, what's your feeling?
My opening comments alluded to research that was begun by Mr. Rumsey that I have continued, him handing off essentially the file. There are very, very few, in my research, reports that paint a positive picture of the medallion system. Noting the very things that Mr. Rumsey pointed out, things do not seem not to have changed very much in the last years in regards to those cities, New York City notably, and other large metropolises, running of the medallion system does not seem to benefit very much the rider. By limiting it, it also keeps new potential cab companies from forming and competition, which we know it's competition due to supply and demand that results in fares being set. But when you have monopolies that are created by governments in the medallion system, you're removing competition because nobody new can come in. Of course, the one thing in respect to those with cab companies that are with us here is I don't know the effect of what Uber and Lyft has done to the business of running a cab company. I can only surmise it is not an easy environment to make money in currently. And to further restrict by increasing the number of medallions without, and we don't have any type of ordinance request to start limiting companies like Lyft and Uber and anyone else that are even smaller than that. It does not appear to me, it did not appear to Mr. Rumsey, and I'm very thankful, Councilman Pereira, that you read his notes here, that anyone taking a clinical approach who doesn't own a cab company would come up with very positive commentary as to why this should continue with further restrictions. And I say that again with all due respect to the folks that are here, to I'm sure argue to the contrary.
I think part of the problem with the medallions, and maybe Faith could talk about some of the problems that the cab companies are having with Ubers and Lyft, that people tend to call a cab company, call an Uber, call a Lyft, whoever gets there first, they go off with. If you don't, if you call for a Lyft or an Uber and you don't take it, then you're gonna get fined, you're still gonna get billed. But if you call and cancel, you won't get that $5 charge. The cab companies, you call them, they get there, you're not there, they're not getting a service, a $5 fee. So there's a lot going on with that. And, getting drivers even has been difficult. Faith, do you have anything to add to what Attorney Fredette spoke about?
Before the pandemic, we had 25 cars out there. After the pandemic, we're down to 12. We've lost a lot of drivers. As far as the medallions go, they're not worth anything anymore. I mean, Uber and Lyft have opened the door for Joe Schmo down the street who needs a few bucks to start riding by Walmart with a sign in his window, rides for $5. This is going on all through the city. And on Facebook, when Uber and Lyft first started lifting, there was a guy that worked for Uber, and he ran an ad, "Don't go work for Uber, come work for me." So this guy opened up his own company, and I want to say his name's Michael Cardoza. He was a Uber driver. He's got his own service going now. So this is all what's going on in the city. And I guess at the time, too, when we were talking about medallions, was, not to put anybody in Fall River down, but a useless ride. Like, people want it now. They want it yesterday. And between us and Fall River Taxi, they called a double call all the time, even before Uber and Lyft came about. We would call each other and say, hey, because we catch on to them after a while, And they say, hey, did you get this call? And they say, yeah. And we just don't send it at all. Because what is it, a mad race to get there? So now, when we were talking about medallions, is if you had 5 other companies in the city, they're going to call the 5 companies. They guarantee they are. And it's a race to see who's going to get there first.
I know that we had Vets Cab, which is now Fall River Cab,
Yeah.
and we have Town Taxi. And I did see another cab company the other day, Shem the Cab, Shem,
Yep, Shab in a cab.
Shab in a Cab.
People gonna get more complaints, because he's worked for every cab company here, in Fall River, New Bedford, Newport, Providence. He's never he just doesn't give the money.
Okay,
And he has a thing about women too, he likes to turn around and hit on the ladies when they get in the car. Call me later on, I'll give you a
Okay.
ride where you gotta go.
I don't know about that, but I do know that we only really have 2 cab companies, because I'm told that there was a problem with one. But those 2 cab companies, I'd like to hear what the other cab company had to say. We did invite them, so they're not here. But would you suggest that we just get rid of the medallions since they're of no purpose
There's
Well,
no use
at this
for 'em.
point?
Would you get rid of liquor licenses? Would you get rid of, stuff like that, license on that? A license is a license.
Okay, because now there's no limit on medallions. Anybody can come in and get one.
Yep.
And that you don't think is fair, or you think is fair?
Well, I've got over 30 years in here, and when I retire, what do I gotta look forward to?
Can you put that microphone in front of him? I have,
I come down here when it was city cab? No, City Hall cab.
oh, yeah.
That's when I took over yellow cab, I had a yellow cab. That was over 30 years ago anyway. I said I would clean up the industry, and I did. Everything was fine, there was no arguing about whose medallion is what. But I always thought that the medallions went with the company. Here I am, 75 years old, ready to retire. She's gonna take over. What happens when she gets 75 years old? It's my partner, that's her husband right there. We're all getting older. If it was a liquor license, you could sell it. You ain't gonna do nothing with the cab license.
So are you of the feeling that the medallions should be limited by the city?
Yes, I am.
You are. Okay. And there was a big controversy about that a few years back. And then people were gonna come in for them. We didn't have a lot of people that came in for them. So, all right, that's something the committee can take up. Counselor Reposa?
Council Pereira, I just have a question, because I don't, again, I'm a youngie here, so I don't know. How many cab companies have either opened or attempted to open the past 10 years?
None to my knowledge. The only one I know is that one cab company,
Yeah.
Shap the Cab.
And how many medallions you currently possess in your
As
company?
many as you wanna give me.
No, but how many do you have in your possession currently?
It used to be, no, we used to have 20,
right now.
22. Oh, now?
Right now, yeah, this moment,
We're
12.
only running 12.
only 12 cars.
12.
Okay,
If we had the workers, there'd be more.
okay. But there's really, it seems like there's no taxi competition, taxi company competition per se. It's really become outside competition of a whole different ballgame, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument, again, you know, to respect the Council Pelletier, the idea is that it should be capped, but really, capping it at this point is irrelevant, because you have other groups that are coming in, Uber and Lyft, are gonna do exactly the same thing and not have to go through the process.
I think the point that Mr. Humes is trying to make is that if I sell my company and I have the medallions and I sell it, then it's worth it to somebody. If anybody can come in and get one, then I have nothing. It's almost like a liquor license can be sold to somebody else. If I'm not using it, I can sell it to you. That we have actually deflated the value of his business by allowing open medallion season, that anybody can come in and get one. So that if we cap the number, then if one cab company needed it, they buy it from each other.
Maybe so, but the problem is that you have another form of business that's essentially devaluing
Right, the
that
Lyft and
already.
the Uber.
It's not an argument of the medallions have value or not, it's an outside entity is devaluing the process in and of itself. So I think that's where the problem lies, and to the attorney, I know in my small research, there are some places that have put in restrictions on Uber and Lyft
That's
as
right.
municipalities.
I don't disagree, we don't have that. And if I was allowed to ask a question, I'm not a counselor. so
No,
I
no,
don't know
you
if
can ask a question,
I'll
absolutely.
yield to the counselor.
Okay.
To the cab companies, all right, using the example of travel agencies, isn't this part of the issue? The business model has changed. I can get on my phone and know exactly what it's gonna cost to go from point A to point B. There's actually competition where you can choose the type of vehicle, for instance, you want. I haven't taken a cab in years. When I call for a cab, I cannot get a quote as to what my trip is going to cost me, can I?
You
From
seen
a
our
dispatcher,
system?
yes.
So you can, so you
give
can,
all the information to the
We're on-
dispatcher,
we're on a
and he will
computer.
tell you everything.
We can
But-
tell you where the cars are, how soon it's gonna get
Yeah.
to your house, everything. Because we do everything by logistics.
We have a computer system that shows where the car is, we can tell people exactly, somebody will call how much
Sure.
longer for my cab, they're on the corner of your street right now as we speak.
so I guess my next question would be, given the fact that cab companies, unlike Lyft and Uber, are operating in a medallion system, the costs of those things have to be passed on to the rider who calls up and calls. So everybody has to pay for the gas, of course, and the insurance issues, which are probably not the same, but that's just a guess. But isn't it the business model that has changed the environment for cab companies to operate in the ways I've just suggested? Being able to call on your phone, quickly get an answer, possibly get a quicker ride because the Uber and Lyft drivers are scattered across the city and might be a lot closer than one of your 12 cabs to come pick up. If I saw a reason to get rid of the medallion system, it would be the business model that's currently operating for folks to get rides and, maybe not so much some of the other things that have been discussed here tonight.
My whole train of thought.
Correct. Could I ask for a 5-minute recess? Go ahead, sorry.
That was it, and how, you know, Uber and Lyft would come into the area charging a quarter of what it we're governed by the city. We are governed on what we charge. Uber and Lyft are not, so they came in charging $3 for a $10 ride. Huh?
Charging $25 a Newport and $150 to come back.
Well, that's it too. See, they got their own thing too, you know, they rake people in by, oh, wow, you're only $40 to go to Newport? Well, try to call them to come back.
Does anyone have any questions? The only question that I have is, did you say, Attorney Fredette, that there are some restrictions that can be put on Ubers and Lyfts?
Certainly, there are cities across this country that have put restrictions in. Some of them, I think if you took a ride recently to Logan Airport,
They don't go into Logan anymore.
there's an exit where you can call for a ride, but it is certainly not convenient. And restrictions like that pop up all over. I haven't seen any, draconian measures taken myself where they've, basically removed the services from cities. I don't know how you could possibly enforce it, but certainly this council someday might want to take up the issue of whether restrictions can be put in place to make it a more level playing field for cabs, or conversely, to understand that the world has changed. Like I said, they're not going to see too many travel companies anymore, and we all know why. Because you go on your phone, you want your ticket to Florida or wherever else you're going, it's right there. You're removing whatever costs were associated with the running of that firm. And I see cab companies probably, in a similar way, that it just must be impossible to try and keep up financially with basically, unbridled companies that spring up overnight. And I've seen that too. It's not just Lyft. And those are we'll call those, for better or worse term, the legit companies. Now you've got these ad hoc companies that are forming. And guess what? When it comes to the money coming out of your wallet for a ride, a lot of people are going to go with the cheapest option they can find.
Well, that's true. And with a cab company, you have to have a certain amount of insurance. Your vehicle, you have to have the meter tested and, a lot of governmental regulations. And Uber and Lyft, I mean, I think your car needs to be a certain year or something like that. But outside of that, if you have somebody in your vehicle, you don't have to have any special insurance.
It's the minimum.
So, times are a-changing. Are there any motions on the floor? Councilor Reposa.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
I'm not, personally speaking, I'm not convinced that the answer to this problem is capping medallions. I think there's some idea that, like, we could probably reduce the, pressure's not the right word, but reduce the, can't think of the right word, but.
Fee?
Yeah, I mean, maybe give the cab company a little bit of a break, because again, they're in a position, they're in a business that is experiencing competition from the outside. Could we levy reducing some of that fee on them so they can continue to be successful to a service in which they provide to people? But at the same time, to the councilor's point, with the understanding that an outside entity and the business model has changed, so we're trying to compete with that, which is hard to, but yet give them a little more leeway to do their work, that they're still providing a service to our people. But I think right with this as it stands, I'm not sure it answers that. So I'm gonna make a motion, grant leave to withdraw on this, personally.
Okay, could you hold your motion,
hold
Counselor
my
I was
Hart?
just curious, Attorney Fredette, when you mentioned restrictions, off the top of your head, do you know what, or are you aware of any for Lyft and Uber that the certain municipalities have
Zones of
restricted?
operation.
Sir?
Zones of operation.
Zones of operation.
Yeah. And that's what they do at the airports. You're not allowed to go into where the taxi cabs, for instance, or the buses are allowed. You have designated areas that restricts the amount of the available rides. So that's kind of like an artificial way of encouraging people to use taxis because they're right there. They're in a line right outside of the baggage claim. So I've seen that. And I noticed it this weekend. I just did a weekend in Milwaukee, and that was absolutely the case, not only in Logan, but when we got up to Milwaukee as well. A very small airport, an airport probably more akin to TF Green than Logan, which is, a monster. So some communities, I think, sympathizing with the plight of where cab companies are now, and obviously encouraging cab companies to continue to exist, they put things like that. Like, you're not allowed to operate Las Vegas. If you go to Las Vegas, you will find hotels that don't allow them in whatsoever. If you're going to order a Lyft ride somewhere on the Strip or outside, you have to walk, and sometimes it's several blocks to do so. So, and that has the effect of, again, people are going to get rides that are convenient, right there for them.
No.
Unless, and I know one of the things here was to increase fares. Well, that's one way to further the plight of the cab company,
Right.
is increase fares. Because, again, people are going to take the easiest out.
Now, as far as those municipalities that created those ordinances, I'm sure there was some pushback by Lyft and Uber, and how serious did it get, as far as, did it go to court? And
I'm sure, and I don't have the answer
Okay,
to that, Mr.
okay.
Hart, but I can certainly look further into that issue if.
yeah, I'd like to maybe have the attorney look into that, as far as if there's a potential of maybe doing something like that.
Well, Counselor
So-
Boza put he just asked for leave to withdraw. If you
Right.
want to ask for a motion to table, giving them opportunity to do that,
Yeah, I think
you're
I'd like to.
precedent over.
Yeah, I think
his
I'd like to
motion.
do that, just for now, make a motion to table while we
Motion
wait
to
to
table?
hear from attorney for that.
Motion to table has been made by Counselor Hart. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. All in favor, or you want a roll call?
No,
No.
I agree with the idea.
All in favor?
Aye.
Attorney Fredette, thank you so much for coming down. It's the first time you've
Thank
been
you.
before
Thank
the
you
ordinance
very
committee.
much.
Nice to meet you.
And I appreciate all the work you did on this, and I look forward. We'll probably be meeting on these things again sometime in April. April's the meeting, because if not, we lose this, and then it never comes back. And I am really looking at making sure we keep things together.
Thank you.
Mr. Humes, you had to give your name and address for the record, and I forgot to ask you your address. I didn't know. And
Frederick-
Faith, same thing.
Frederick Humes, Jr. Four- 4,000, I had to think where I live. How many, yeah, 4001 North Main Street.
Faith Latessa, 119 Wyola Road in Swansea.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I didn't get the address. Counselor, Repo,
Key West did ban them for years. It was nice to go down there and just see a couple little taxi cab companies.
That's good to know.
thank you both for coming, appreciate
They
it.
allow them now, but I'm
Thank you for that.
Counselor Reposa?
So just to be clear, are we asking Corporation Council to present to us examples of ordinances from other areas and municipalities?
Yes.
That restricted Uber and Lyft? And
Yes.
have them presented to us at the next meeting? Okay.
Yep,
Yes,
exactly.
and we'd like to have a meeting in April. I know we have one scheduled for April the 9th at 4:30, and I believe April 19th, 23rd.
One customer pulled up to the house. She was walking to the van. She tripped and fell.
Oh,
Boy.
She died.
oh, my goodness.
We gave her in the hospital.
Oh,
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn made by Counselor Reposa and seconded by Counselor Hart. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All in favor?